livestock.
That's probably right.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I will call a meeting to order. Welcome, everybody, to our June 15th council meeting. I'll start off with our land acknowledgement statement. We acknowledge with respect the history, spirituality, and culture of the Anishinaabe, the people of the three fires known as the Ojibwe, Odawa, Potawatomi nations who have inhabited this land from time immemorial. Further give thanks to Chippewa Saugeen, the Chippewa Nawash, now known as the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, as the traditional keepers of this land. Now known as the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, as the traditional keepers of this land. We also recognize the Métis and Inuit whose ancestors share this land and these waters. May we all, as treaty people, live with respect on this land and live in peace with friendship with all its diverse people. Approval of the agenda. Madam Clerk, I see you have one to add. This council members, any other council member, anything to add? Seeing none, I will read the motion. Or do you want to speak to it, Madam Clerk?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So to formally request through your chair, staff are requesting that a closed session discussion be added to the agenda this evening as agenda item 19.1 to host discussions under open meeting exemption K of section 239 of the Municipal Act, being a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Carlson.
I'm wondering if we could add about this Kilsyth Strawberry Social under announcements.
You can do that. When I get to that on the agenda, please do. So there's no way to add on, so I'll read the recommendation. The recommendation is that a closed session be added to the agenda as item 19.1 to host discussions under open meeting exemption K of section 239 of the Municipal Act, being a position, plan, procedure, criteria, instructions to be applied to any negotiation carried on or to be carried on by on behalf of the municipality or local boards, and that the agenda be approved as amended. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Thompson, second by Councillor Pringle. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? Seeing none, show of hands, all in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Declaration of pecuniary interest, you can declare anytime you see fit during the meeting. Minutes of the previous minutes. The recommendation is that the minutes of the council meeting held on June 1st, 2022 be adopted. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. Moved by Deputy Mayor Carlson, second by Councillor Thompson. Any discussion on the motion before us? Seeing none, a show of hands, all in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Now we're down to announcements. Deputy Mayor Carlson.
So Councillor Barfoot brought this up and Councillor Pringle looked it up online, and we think that Kilsyth Strawberry Social is June 23rd at 5:30 at the Derby Arena. So people could maybe confirm that before heading out. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any other announcements? Seeing none, I'll move on to the agenda then. We're down to public hearings. The recommendation is that the regular meeting of council be recessed to hold a public hearing for zoning amendment application Z0822 for Michael Schultz. Someone move to put on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Pringle, second by Councillor Barfoot. Any discussion motion before us? Seeing none, show of hands, all in favor of the motion? Opposed? The motion is carried. This meeting has been called to consider zoning bylaw amendment application Z0822 for property located at 1776787 Gray Road 18. Madam Clerk, please advise those present by which the notice of the public meeting was given.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Notice of this public meeting was given by ordinary mail to all property owners within 120 meters, 400 feet of the subject property, by email to all the prescribed bodies on May 11th, 2022, posted at the subject property and posted on the Township of Georgia Bluffs website. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Township of Georgia Bluffs before the proposed zoning bylaw is adopted or passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the Township of Georgian Bluffs to the local planning appeal tribunal. The person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the local planning appeal tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to add the person or public body as a party.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Madam Planner, please proceed with your review of the application. Jen, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, everyone. So this application seeks to increase the maximum lot coverage from 10 to 16.5% for all buildings and structures on the property, and also to increase the total lot coverage for accessory structures from 5% to 11.7%. And that would be to permit the construction of a 446 square meter, which is about 4,800 square feet, structure for personal storage on a rural residential lot. So no other relief to the bylaw was requested through this application. So in the staff report, there is a policy review. However, I'd like to bring to council's attention that comments received from the Grace Harbor Conservation Authority identified 2 areas to be addressed to confirm consistency with provincial policy. The Conservation Authority is recommending that drainage be addressed to minimize the impacts to the neighboring properties and existing infrastructure, and that the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks be contacted to ensure that development is in accordance with provincial and federal legislation protecting endangered species, as the Natural Heritage Information Center records indicate the potential for endangered or threatened species within the vicinity of the property. In the comments that we've received to date, the Grace Harbor Conservation Authority note that they generally have no objection to the current proposal, with the implementation of a timing window for tree removal for appropriate erosion and sediment control measures. The proposed development is located within the regulated area on the subject property and will require a permit from their office. They wish to be notified of any decision on the application and any appeals filed. The County Planning and Development Department, in their correspondence, note that it appears that through the planning justification report submitted, that development will be outside of the hazard lands, and pre-consultation has already occurred with the local conservation authority. Provided there are no further comments or concerns from the local conservation authority, staff have no concerns. County Transportation Services have no comments or concerns. The Risk Management Office note that the property is not located within a vulnerable source protection area where policies apply under the Clean Water Act. They have no comments. We did receive written comments from the neighbor, Chris Van Bendegem, identifying that a structure of this size is not appropriate for the subject property and would be a disruption for neighboring properties. I should take a step back there and just note that the comments provided by the neighbor and by the agencies are attached to this report in their entirety. At this point, I'm summarizing the key points of the comments received from the neighbor to bring council's awareness to the concerns. So I summarized the concerns as follows. Proximity of construction to the hazard lands and the ecological impact on the hazard land and woodland areas. The size of the proposed structure will exceed the size of the house, making it the predominant building. The size of all buildings on the lot will result in it being overdeveloped. The visual impact of the structure and the construction activities. Has any consideration been made to provide a screening using fences or shrub? There's also a large amount of traffic on the property at times. The zoning bylaw was approved in 2020, and the question is how an amendment can be made for this in just 2 years of its duration. So I did provide some comment back to these concerns. As noted in the report, the Planning Act does provide a council the right not to accept applications to amend a new zoning bylaw within 2 years of its passing. But council did in 2020 pass a resolution to permit amendments and minor variances to the zoning bylaw. And additionally, as that was done and approved in February of 2020, the 2-year limitation would have expired already this year. So applications could be made to council to amend the bylaw. The concern sorry, the concern with the size of the buildings and the property being overdeveloped in the report, I do support the Conservation Authority comments and recommend that the decisions on the applications be deferred until the applicant has provided documentation to demonstrate consistency with the provincial policy statement. So the Conservation Authority had recommended an engineered grading and drainage plan, as well as consulting with the ministry to make sure there's no species at risk. The submission of that grading and drainage plan will assess whether or not the proposed structure will contribute to the property being overdeveloped, whether or not that structure or that property can accommodate the additional structure at that size. I would note for council's consideration that there was no application, no part of the application proposes to increase the maximum height of the accessory structure. So it would be within the 5 meter height restriction set by the zoning bylaw. So I see that the applicant's consultant is part of the meeting this evening, and I have no further comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Planner. Welcome, Councillor Sullivan. One member of the public, Chris Van Benden, and I apologize for not pronouncing your name right, registered with the clerk to provide comments in support of or in opposition of the application. Chris, please go ahead. Comment. Are you Chris? Yeah. Please go to the mic.
Hi, everyone. Yes, as it was noted, Jen kind of summarized some of my concerns. I guess the main concern now at this point would be the screening. Is there going to be any kind of screening provided, whether it be fencing or shrubbery, to give us some privacy from not only the construction, but also when the building has been built? The other would be requiring a written development agreement, ensuring that there's no change in the future of zoning on the property. At this point, I believe it's just zoned as residential, but there's concern about it being rezoned to home industry in the future. So that would be, I guess, kind of the main concerns at this point. I've already addressed the drainage, which was another issue that we had, but apparently that's been or going to be addressed in the drainage plan that's to be submitted. So at this point, it's just the main ones right now for the screening and the development agreement.
Thank you, Chris. I wonder if I were to introduce the agent to Ron Davidson is here. If maybe Ron, you want to comment on their concerns. And please introduce yourself, Ron. And
yes, good evening. Can you hear me okay, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, we can.
Perfect, thank you. So yeah, my name is Ron Davidson. I am a planning consultant. I wasn't aware that you'd be filling the council chambers tonight. I would have shown up myself. So I'm representing Mitch Schultz, and Mitch is, I believe, in front of you. I'm going to say a few things, and then he wants to address a few issues as well. And he might be better suited to try to answer Chris's 2 questions that she had. Mitch did a fair amount of pre-consultation before he actually hired me to help with the project. The big part of that was speaking with the Grey Sauble Conservation Authority, and they indicated they were fine with the building location as long as the building stayed out of the regulated area. And there's a lower lying area at the back of the property, and Mitch's proposed building location is not within the regulated area. Didn't learn until yesterday or late last night, I guess, or last night, that the Conservation Authority is now concerned about a species at risk matter. Now, I need to say just a couple things about that. They are not suggesting that there is a threatened or endangered species on the property, nor are they suggesting that there's definitely a threatened or endangered species on the abutting property, and that would probably be in the wooded area if it was. They're saying that according to their maps, there has been a sighting of a threatened or endangered species somewhere in the area, and in the area can range up to 10 kilometers away. And the timing of that could be somewhere between last week to 40 years ago. And I'm not trying to belittle their comment. I'm just trying to put it in context that just because they made that comment that we should take a look at threatened and endangered species and speak with the ministry about it doesn't necessarily mean that there is in fact a threatened or endangered species on the adjacent lands. The problem is when you try to speak with the ministry, they just tell you, well, there's a checklist. I've tried to do that checklist myself. I can't. You've got to be a biologist, and I've read a lot of environmental impact studies, but I still can't do that. So if by the Conservation Authority making that very general comment that this needs to be looked at, if in fact it does, yeah, that means probably about an $8,000 or $10,000 scoped environmental impact study. And again, the Conservation Authority put right in their own letter, you don't need to do an environmental impact study, but now we're hearing that they want us to address the species at risk. And again, the only way to address that is through a scoped environmental impact study. So I was talking to Jennifer this morning about this. I'm going to try to get the Conservation Authority back on site and to reconsider. There will be about 30 to 40 feet of grass, manicured lawn between the building and where that forested area is. And again, I've read enough environmental impact studies to know how they end. And with a setback like that, and when it's all grass and manicured, again, not a biologist, but I highly doubt there's going to be an impact. But to save everybody some trouble, I'm going to see if we can get the Conservation Authority back on the property and see if we can get them to rethink that very general comment, because it can cause a lot of expense, even though nobody is saying that there's a threatened or endangered species on the subject property or on the abutting property. They're saying there's one in the area. Next thing, lot grading and drainage. We assume that had to be done, hoping, of course, to do it at the building permit stage, wanting to, before again you drop another, pick a number, $8,000 to $10,000, and getting an engineer on site to do a drainage plan, kind of hoping that we'd have an approval in place before he has to do that. But anyways, been speaking to Mitch about that. He's going to have to think about that. Just the one thing, two more things about the one neighbor's property, Chris's comments. Now, just keeping in mind, her house is at the front of the property, as is Mitch's house, whereas this building is at the back. And I'm not saying she won't be able to see it, but I'm saying it shouldn't cause an impact where she's trying to look out her window and her view is being obscured by this building. The building's about 110, 115 feet away from her property. I'm sorry, from her house and at the back. Not to belittle her comments. I'm just trying to point that out.
Excuse me, Ron.
Yeah.
They're having technical difficulties in the council chambers. I'm just going to ask you to pause for a second until they indicate that that they can hear us.
Okay.
Sorry.
Oh no, that's okay. I hate repeating myself. I really do.
Okay, apologies for that delay, everyone. It appears we're back up and running. I believe we left you, Ron Davidson, and giving your overview of the application, and specifically in reference to the, I don't want to speak out of term, but the identified species by the Conservation Authority. So if you could please pick up from there. And you're muted.
There we go. Yeah, I'm not sure how much you heard about the species at risk. What I will say is that I have already asked the Conservation Authority to take another look here. The second they make those comments that there might be a species at risk somewhere, within the 10-kilometer area, that can be a very expensive thing to address. Even though you're pretty darn sure that there's not going to be an impact given where this building is going to be located. Anyways, before this comes back to council, we will be talking to the Conservation Authority about that matter. Lot grading and drainage plan, Mitch was hoping to do that later at the building permit stage. Just a little bit concerned about throwing down that type of money now with an engineer's office if the application doesn't actually get approved. But Mitch and I will have to talk about that more. And then one of the last couple of things I'll say, and Jennifer, thank you. She just put that up on the screen. You heard Chris speak a few minutes ago. That's her house in green. She doesn't have a green roof. I put that on there, and I've superimposed in red where the cursors are, or the cursor is. Where the building would go. And my point to this exercise was to show that her house is, I'm not belittling her concerns at all, but her house is near the front of the property like Mitch's house is, and this big building shouldn't be impacting her view, or I wouldn't think it would be anyways. There is a separation distance between her house and that building location of about 110, 115 feet, I believe. I did measure it earlier today. So I just thought that's kind of important to show where that is. The last thing I'll say is that in the township of Georgian Bluffs, your lot coverage provisions are very, very low. I don't think you'd find another municipality that has such restrictions on there. Again, not suggesting for a second that you don't have the right to do that. I'm just saying it does make it difficult, though, for some people to be able to build certain things. I did a quick review of other rural municipalities and their zoning bylaws for lands that are covered, that do not are not connected with water and sewer. And typically the lot coverage is, the maximums range anywhere from 20% all the way up to 35%. Might be something you might want to consider when you update your zoning bylaw next. But I think it still is a relevant part of this discussion, because it's the proposed lot coverage does no way suggest that this is an overdevelopment of the property, that it's still a very low lot coverage. I think now, Mr. Mayor, Mitch would like to say just a couple words. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Chris, you have a reply?
Sorry about that. I wanted to make reference. I know you made the notation that the house is in a proximity far from where the structure is going to be. The concern is not for any kind of screening for the house per se, it's for the yard. So, we're not predominantly in our house. We are out in our yard doing things, and this is the issue, is that there is no screening. Our yards are open to each other. So that is the issue. You know, inside the house is one thing, but when you're out in your yard and there's construction and things going on, it's a whole other thing. So that's why I'm asking for the screening, is for that reason. And I also wanted to ask Jen about the size of the building. I'm not sure if you addressed it, Jen, as far as it being the predominant building on the site due to its size. Was that addressed, or I can't remember? You can remind me.
Jen, are you still there?
Yes, I am. Through you, Mr. Mayor, the what determines the predominant building on the property is the land use zoning. So with this property, the house would be the predominant use because it's a rural residential lot and it's under 2 acres. So the that structure would be an accessory structure and it wouldn't be permitted if the house wasn't already there.
Okay, I understand. Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you, Chris, for your comments, and they've been noted. Mitch, Mr. Schultz, you comment.
In response to Chris's comments, the proposed building is pulled ahead from the hazard land and rear property line by 45 feet. The size of the building is to store personal items. We do have a lot of toys. We have a 35-foot camping trailer, Sea-Doos, snowmobiles, 2 summer cars, a restored truck. So we'd like to protect everything from the elements and get them out of our backyard, as well as keeping them organized in a building rather than scattered around the yard. In saying that, we do keep our property neat and tidy. The storage building would be kept this way as well. There's no more traffic in our laneway than anyone else's. I do run a business, but I don't run it from home. So the concern of home industry, again, it's not for the business, it's for personal storage, and I have no problem zoning that as just personal, so it can never be opened up as home industry. And I do know the size is there for that, but that's not a problem to change that. And we're just looking for a spot to store our toys. Again, not for business. We love the area and we've worked on cleaning up the property over the last 7 years there, and we'll continue to do so. As for separation between the properties, I was approached the first year or two that we were there, and they asked if we'd put a fence up from front to back if we were interested in splitting. I said no, we are out in the country, so I didn't see a need for a fence. Probably 3 years ago, we did put up a cedar rail fence, just split rails. My wife and I did that. But as for a screen, I'm not too sure how to build a screen during construction or what we're looking for to separate the properties in regards to that. But that's all I have, but thank you.
Thank you, Mitch, for your comments. Does the committee have any questions on the application for us? And Councillor Thompson, you still with us?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm here.
So there's no comments from the committee? Councillor Pringle, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, just a quick note on the presentation there. It was good to get all the information there. And I guess what I'm thinking on my own behalf or myself is that hopefully that both parties could come to an agreement on some sort of fencing or screening to separate the properties to keep everybody happy. It is it is a large shop that you're building, and I understand why you're building it. So I understand your neighbor's point of view too, that maybe they don't always want to be looking at your driving shed. So I guess I'm asking or hoping that they can come to a neighborly agreement to figure out how to work that out and move forward.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Pringle. Is there any other comments from the committee? Seeing none, I'm going to read the recommendation I had before me. That the decision on the application be deferred until the applicant has provided documentation to demonstrate consistency with the section 2.17 and 2.2 of the Provincial Policy Statement 2020. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. Moved by Deputy Mayor Carlton, second by Councillor Sutherland. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? See none, a show of hands, all in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Now for a call for an adjournment of the public meeting. Moved by Councillor Thompson, second by Councillor Sutherland. Show of hands, all in favor of adjournment? Opposed? The motion is carried. We are now adjourned and back to our regular session. Now, it's great to see so many delegations here tonight, so we better get right at it. We have 3 delegations this evening. As a reminder to all delegates, you will have 10 minutes to submit your comments to council. The clerk will provide you with a 9-minute warning should you need it. I will now welcome our partners from the Grey Bruce Local Immigration Partnership. Please introduce yourself prior to commencing your presentation, and you have the floor. And I'm not sure who's going up first. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening, council members. Thank you so much for your time today. We are here to share with you all how YMCA of Owen Sound Welcoming Community Grey Bruce and Grey Bruce Local Immigration Partnership is acting as a circle of support for newcomer integration. I'd like to start with Grey Bruce Local Immigration Partnership. We are Immigration Refugee Citizenship Canada funded, which is IRCC federal government funded, which covers the program delivery as well as 2 staff positions, myself as the coordinator of GBLIP and an outreach specialist. We just had her two days ago. And we are supported by economic development staff from Grey County and Bruce County both. From Grey County, we have Pierre Valley and Manpreet Kaur Sangha. And from Grey County, we have Jacinda Rudolph supporting the initiatives and objectives outlined in our strategy. So we basically started in 2020. We call ourselves Pandemic LIP, as we started in April 2020. And all across Canada, we have 81 LIPs. And in Ontario, we have 37. So what we actually do, can we have the next slide, please? The next one. Yeah, so we try to bring together community partners who are invested in the successful integration of newcomers. We had developed in 2021 our strategic plan, and we identified these 4 pillars where we need to work on. So we are building capacity by engaging all municipalities across Grey and Bruce to include the welcoming community characteristics. We are trying to strengthen community by engaging and educating our stakeholders for the engagement and community participation and hosting events in acknowledging the strength of diversity. We are trying to cultivate prosperity by initiating a region-wide mentorship program where the employers and other resources they help navigating the newcomer in the region in the employment journey. We're trying to foster inclusion by helping and implementing the anti-discrimination and anti-racism strategies, and also celebrating and acknowledging the multiculturalism in the society. Next slide, please. This is basically the composition. We have large partner council member of 57 stakeholders. Partner council is basically aligned toward and is working toward achieving the objectives outlined in the strategy, and our staff is helping them. And the partner council comprises of from various sector: education, health, transportation, and all the municipalities. We have employers from the partner council member. Few of the members have joined employer subcommittee, where they are trying to navigate and work on more how integrating how the hiring practices should be, what shall work toward retaining those newcomer in the region. We have community subcommittee working toward community integration, and I'm glad to share that Town of Georgian Bluffs has representation there. Carly is in the committee there, and she's helping us a lot in developing the welcome package as well for newcomers and creating a platform to share all the resources too. And then we have Belong subcommittee, where we are trying to make a strategy or celebrate events for newcomers who are already here, so that they feel that they belong in this community. So now I pass on to my colleague Sunit, who is working for settlement as direct service providers.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and councillors and the members of our community here for listening to us today. My name is Sunit Kukreja, and I am the program coordinator for the Grey Bruce Settlement and Language Services in partnership with the YMCA of Owen Sound Grey Bruce. As most of you know, that the Settlement and Language Services came into existence 2 years back in the year 2020. Could we have a next slide, please? So what do we do at the Settlement Services? At Settlement Services, we are ministry-funded services by the IRCC, which is Immigration, Refugee, Citizenship Canada. So we are here to help newcomers who move to Canada, not only in streams by their choice, but also during crisis situations like the recent Afghanistan war or the crisis in Ukraine nowadays. So our aim and endeavor is to help individuals wanting to make Grey and Bruce their home, to integrate into the society, to empower them, use their skills, and help them call these areas their homes. Could I have the next slide, please? We do offer a whole lot of services, but to sum up a few, given the time constraint, we do provide one-on-one support services, just like a new person coming into a new country, resources in terms of applying for a SIN number, financial aid assistance that is provided by the governments in case of a crisis situation. Language classes. We do have language instructions for newcomers, which are offered remotely because of the diverse geographical locations in our counties. They are offered throughout the week and anybody can access them. We do offer mobile service delivery because transportation is an issue in these areas. So we do not want any client left out because of connections. We do have Swiss services, which are the settlement workers in schools, helping navigating the school systems, translation, interpretations, and the workplace language support. With this, we try and connect the newcomers who are full of skills and experiences in their hometown countries to connect them with the employers who are here and who need those kind of skills to move forward. So that is all from my end. If you guys have any questions and concerns, please feel free to reach us at settlement.org or the YMCA of Owen Sound Grey Bruce. And now I would pass the mic to David. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Burley and members of council and guests. My name is David Morris, and I am chair of a nonprofit, relatively young nonprofit corporation called Welcoming Communities Grey Bruce. Next slide. We were the merger of several smaller organizations that had been in existence for a number of years that realized it made sense for us to be together under one umbrella organization because we all were working towards a similar objective of making this everyone who lives here feel welcome here, regardless of where they come or what their mother tongue was, or whether they were born here and part of a group that were historically discriminated against. So next slide, please. We are not a direct service agency. That's what the Y does, but we work behind the scenes in a variety of ways. We have involved in a number of projects funded by both federal and provincial governments over the 2 years that we gathered information specific to rural areas as to what kind of help and services and facilities that the newcomers to rural areas needed as distinct from more urban areas. So those information we share through workshops by presentations like this. For example, last night we held a workshop for people interested in hosting families from Ukraine. And those are the types of things we do, as well as when we were kind of slowed down in the community engagement part because of COVID, but it's our hope to have events where people get together across cultures and learn from one another, because that's really the basis of understanding. And we collaborate with whoever has a similar interest with us. We've had a lot of support from the United Way, from the Y, from both levels of both counties. We've done projects with Georgian College. We're engaged with one with the Chamber of Commerce. We had one with the University from Toronto that actually was studying the area as to why newcomers stay in rural areas. And they picked Grey and Bruce. So next slide. I'll leave it at that. I think we've used up our 10 minutes, but we would be glad to receive any questions and comments that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Great presentation.
And I live in Georgian Bluffs. I see reference to a snowplow in the minutes. That went off the road onto our property this winter. In case you wonder where I live.
We just need a place to park the plow. Thank you very much for your presentation. Does council have any questions of our presentation? Deputy Mayor Carlton.
No questions. I just think it's a valuable service that you're offering. My daughter-in-law came from Romania when she was 16 with no knowledge of English, so I have some close-hand experience of what it's like for people coming from a different country and not having the language. So thank you for what you're doing.
To you, Mr. Chair, I would just like to say thank you so much for acknowledging and appreciating. I would just like to conclude with how you as municipal leaders can approach all three of us or other organization. Let's say just putting it in a case scenario for the Ukrainian crisis we have. So members of community are ready to support, but they do not know where to start from. They could connect with GBLIP as we provide indirect services, connecting them with resources available in community, or is there funding available to support them? And then they can connect with YMCA for direct services, language, SIN, and banking information, and WCGB, like Welcoming Community, Grey Bruce, and other community organizations which bridge like important and critical gap of creating and building awareness for community is required. I think the LIP purpose is to connect and collaborate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Kirk has made notes. I've seen her doing that, so it's great. So there's no questions for our presentations. We want to thank you on behalf of council. Thank you very much. So I'll move on to our agenda. We have a next delegation, the year again, Tracy Smith. I'll read the recommendation that the 2021 draft financial statement for the year ending December 31st, 2021, as presented by BDO, are hereby approved. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. And could I have the screen, please? Someone to move to put it on the floor? Moved by Councillor Barfoot, second by Councillor Thompson. Tracy, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to thank the mayor and the council for having me here this evening. I'd like to thank Samantha and her team for helping us get through the audit and getting this to you today. As your auditor, we have the responsibility to communicate with those charged with governance. The white report in your agenda package on page 55 contains all the required communications under Canadian auditing standards. The communication is very similar to prior year as it's prescribed by the standards, and it's required to be communicated on an annual basis. So I'm just going to provide a very brief summary of the communication and then a high-level overview of the draft financial statements. The financial statements are in draft and they need to be approved by council before we can release, before they can be released in final. We confirm annually we are independent. Materiality was $450,000. There were no internal control issues that need to be disclosed to council. The unadjusted differences on page 8 of our report are not material, so we can issue an audit, a clean audit report that has no qualifications. So that's a very brief, high-level overview since I only have 10 minutes. If we could scroll forward a few pages to Appendix A, which is on page 74 of the agenda package, which is our audit report on the draft financial statements. So it's management's responsibility for the preparation of the financial statements. It's our responsibility as your auditor to give an opinion on the financial statements prepared by management. Auditor's report is on, as I said, on page 74 and 75 of the agenda package. We were engaged to perform an audit, which is the highest level of assurance that can be provided by a public accountant. And our opinion is in the second paragraph. In our opinion, the financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects in accordance with Canadian auditing standards. So essentially clean opinion. So no issues were found during the audit that came to our attention that need to be discussed with council. Just a very high level overview of the financial statements. On page 76 is the statement of financial position or the balance sheet. So a point in time at December 31st, 2021. The total financial assets at December 31st were $24.1 million. And the largest part of that is cash of $22.5 million. So there was an increase of $6.5 million relating to an increase in reserves of $4.5 million and $2.4 million in cash came in from the Ingalls Falls construction that you had financed in advance, and now you're getting the grant money. So, so that is replenishing your cash balance. The liabilities totaled $4.5 million. The largest of the liabilities is your normal trade payables and developer deposits, and those fluctuate depending on the timing of your capital projects. Long-term debt, there was no new long-term debt, and you repaid $239,000 of your principal in the year. That brings you down to the net financial assets, which is the financial assets less the liabilities. So that's a key financial indicator. It's positive, so that means you do have resources available for the future. It increases as you build your reserves and pay down your debt. The tangible capital assets were $53.8 million. So that's again at cost, not replacement value, less amortization, and brings us down to the accumulated surplus of $73.5 million, which is the equity that you've built up, both monetary and physical assets. So that includes $53 million invested in capital assets and $21.5 million in reserves. Moving on to the next page is the statement of operations, your transactions for the year. Important to note that this is a consolidated statement, so it does include 75% of the Inner Township Fire Department and 50% of the biodigester. The revenues totaled $17.5 million, which is similar to the prior year. The budget amounts do not include fire or bio or water, and so that's why there's a large discrepancy between your budgeted amounts and your actual amounts. The difference between 2020 actual and 2021 actual, the main difference was in the government transfers, and again, that's the Ingalls Falls grants that you received in the prior year or earned in the prior year. You didn't receive the money until the current year. The expenses totaled $14.5 million. And again, the expenses include your operating expenses and amortization. So it does not include any capital purchases or transfers to reserves. The budget numbers also do not include amortization. So it's difficult on this report to compare budget to actual. So you do need to rely on your internal reporting process to look at those types of variances. The annual surplus of $3.4 million is another important financial indicator. It's important to note, however, that that is not your budget surplus. The budget surplus focuses on the short term and is the amount that affects your budget and your tax rates. During the year, the municipality had a budget surplus of $1.5 million that was transferred to capital reserves. And a large part of the budget transfer was because you had over $1 million in capital projects that were to be funded by taxation that didn't proceed in the current year. So those monies are transferred to reserve for future. The annual surplus on this statement focuses on your long term. So it should always be positive and it should always be a large number because you need to fund your capital assets and pay for your debt from this annual surplus that's on this page. So if we take that annual surplus and move it to the next page, we adjust for the amortization and the actual capital purchases. So this statement still does not include any transfers to reserve or debt payments. So that's why at the bottom you have an increase in net financial assets. As you increase your reserves, you're going to see a positive increase in your net financial assets. So that increase in net financial asset can be positive or negative. It just depends on whether you're building reserves or whether you're taking money out of reserves to pay for capital purchases. So neither positive or negative is good in this case. The last statement is your physical assets in the cash in the bank. About the middle of the page, you had $6.3 million come in from operations. And you paid $2.6 million in capital assets, and you repaid debt of $239,000. So overall, the township is in a strong financial position, strong operating position. There was $1.5 million transferred to capital reserves. You do have a small amount of external debt, but overall, you're in a positive net financial position. So you do have reserves, $21.5 million, some available for future use. So I would like to emphasize the need, though, to focus on your long-term planning and multi-year budgets as part of your planning process. So, any questions?
Thank you very much, Tracy. Does council have any questions?
Did I do it in 10 minutes or less?
See no questions, Tracy. Another fantastic job. It's great that the township's in such great shape. Thanks to our staff. It's nice to see that. So there's no other questions. I'll thank Tracy very much for presenting here tonight. And I did have a motion, I believe, and I had it moved and seconded. So I will ask for show of hands, all in favor of the motion on the floor, please. The motion is carried. Thank you. So moving on for agenda, we're down to our last delegation, and with great pleasure, I'd like to introduce our provincial appointee, Barry Hatt. Please stand up, Barry. And I would like to introduce our member at large, Peter Hughes. And I'm the chair of the Police Service Board. And Barry and I had a vote, and Peter is our secretary, and he's going to present a report here tonight.
I was honored to accept that role, Dwight. Thank you. My name is Peter Hughes, and I'm the community rep on the Georgian Bluffs Police Service Board. And we attended a conference between May 25th and the 27th down in Toronto. And I'm here to highlight some of the findings from my report, of which was pre-circulated to council. The conference itself was, I have to say the theme of the conference was equity, diversity, and inclusion, and anti-racism. That kept coming up. It came through in the keynote speaker huge. It came through in several presentations, and it's something that's not new to us. It's something that they just continue to create awareness about. So in the very first, I'll just highlight quickly each of the main speakers. And I do have a little add-on. I forgot to mention the speaker about the Cannabis Act, but I'll mention that at the end. But the Modernizing Governance in Ontario, this Ryan Teschner, who's with the Toronto Police Services, he gave a really good example of a police service board. And keep in mind, they're not OPP, they're the Toronto board. He gave a really good example of when the convoy in February hit Toronto, how prepared they were. Now, in fairness to them, they had a good lesson from Ottawa to get prepared fast because, and I won't mention Ottawa because it's not fair to it, but this gave a really good example of a police service board meeting with their chief, meeting with their media services and getting a message out so that they weren't caught off guard. And it's a true issue where they gain public trust. And that's what police have to do right now. They've admitted right up front, they've got a lot of work to do to reestablish public trust, which we also found out in the United States. The second speaker was Stephen Reed, who spoke to the theme of the conference and basically asked us to look for a cultural change being needed in these areas and us as police service board members, as well as working with our police services, have to keep these issues in mind at all times. The third speaker was an OPP officer from Wellington County, Beth Hickey, and it was all about human trafficking. And they received a grant in Wellington County, and this grant allowed them to do such things as billboard ads, radio ads, online presentations, go into schools, creation of video on this topic. And it's becoming a big issue in rural communities, especially with the COVID-19, the isolations. And our very last zone meeting last week, we had a 1-hour presentation in our Zone 5 meeting, and it was the Waterloo Police Services Board right beside Wellington. But the whole subject was human trafficking again, and what a problem it is raising. And I had no idea how much money is being made in this area, but it on the criminal side, it's pretty astonishing. Policing and beyond. This Patrick Weaver spoke to us, and it was basically that they're having to do more with less money. They're going to have to reorganize their resources. They're consider ideas such as special constables who aren't necessarily carrying a gun, who don't really carry, who they can save some dollars in that type of human resource management. And some of the services now have mental health teams to help reduce the need for police in situations. For instance, in schools where they can send in mental health workers prior to the police being needed, and then if they're still needed, they would certainly come in and help out. The keynote speaker on Friday morning was Dr. Ivan Joseph. He was quite an energetic sports psychologist. The message I got from him mostly was we've really got to look at how we hire people. We can't just go with the slated resume style. We have to look beyond the applicant's years of experience, look and what's on their resume, and you just really have to support these people when they're hired, because they will really pay you dividends down the road. And when you're when recruiting, look beyond their task ability, examine their social abilities, and as this would be a key to both their interaction and functionability on your staff. It was a very interesting talk. And mandatory training, he said, has to go. We have to include the people and get ideas from them on where they feel that they need the training the most. Then we got a new executive director by a welcome from Lisa Darling, who is struggling from COVID. She did it electronically, and you had to feel for her. She was having a tough time, but she's much better now. Anyway, the intent of she gave a big welcome, but the OPP boards, of which Georgian Bluff is governed under, will be receiving a survey. Well, we have received it, and the theme of the survey was all around the areas of crime prevention, victim assistance, resources needed, building trust, which I mentioned earlier, and community safety concerns. This was completed by both Member Hatt and Burley and myself, not on Tuesday, on Wednesday, June the 8th, and the survey was submitted within the deadline. We did it as a group and agreed on the answers, and it was mostly a multiple choice approach. Finally, which wasn't on your report, I apologize, was the Cannabis Act. Rachel Higgins, the Deputy Director of Cannabis Legalization, spoke to us. It's been legal since 2018, which is 4 years now, which is kind of hard to believe. The licensed market has tremendously grown, but so has the unlicensed market. And the biggest concern, there's no regulations in the unlicensed market. So the biggest concern is, what are they putting in this stuff? That we have to create a community awareness of safety concerns and harmful additives that can be added and serious risks involved. There's in Ontario, 24 people currently working on legal cannabis production, 12 officers and 12 civilians. That's it. So the message was loud and clear. They have their work cut out for them, and more education is needed to educate the public of the dangers associated with the illegal cannabis market. And that is a summary of my report.
Thank you, Peter. A job well done. Does council have any questions of our member, Police Service Board? I will say, just so council and everyone knows, I had the great opportunity to interview our new police commander. And the announcements will be coming very soon. Councilor Barba, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Peter, good report. One of my concerns is, and I don't know how to word this, I got to be cautious on this one. The municipality gets complaints about a property owner or a property that's listed in more than one owner's name. So they're allowed, each owner registered is allowed so many plants. Well, the township wasn't made aware that this was what was going on in a densely populated upper scale residential area in the township. It's caused a lot of heartaches in the municipality. Where we were, hands were tied, and I'll have to get our bylaw enforcement officer to explain it, was the previous zoning was such that this was allowed. And I can't get more specific on it. But what happens to the property, the adjacent property owners? Like everyone knows, if you've gone and take a look down in the Essex County area, how that has affected property values of adjacent properties. People were, as soon as a greenhouse operation was sold down there, neighbors sold their property because they knew what was going in. So, you know, it's the OPP. I know their hands are strong, and I listened to several chiefs of police speak to this issue at conferences in the past, and they all said the same thing. This was pushed through too quick. The policing authorities did not have the tools, nor the manpower, nor the training to deal with it. Municipalities were supposed to get some type of compensation if it affected their municipality. I haven't heard of anybody getting anything. So what is the OPP, although they're recognizing it, you can recognize a problem, but what are you doing about it? I know of one situation where it went on for years. Nothing happened. So what's the OPP or the policing authorities recommending it be done?
Councilor Barfoot, all excellent comments you've made. And I do not think that the Police Service Board can answer your questions here tonight, but I will say we will take it up at our next meeting with our new commander, which will be in place. He's a very energetic person, and I'm quite sure we will have some great comments coming back from him on that topic.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I have gone so far as to speak to our federal member, because nothing ever gets done. It's, you know, oh yeah, well, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do this. Think of the poor property owner. I'll give you an example. Retired couple. Buy their, you know, retirement home. And somebody buys the property next door, puts in a grow up, whether it's legal or illegal. You've just doomed that retirement couple to lose their investment. So we're not protecting our ratepayers when it comes to stuff like this.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you for your great comments, and we will address it.
I'm tired of promises.
Well, I'm not going to promise you anything, Carol. I'm just going to tell you we will address it with the new commander. Thank you very much for bringing it up. Does council have any other questions of our Police Service Board members? Seeing none, I again thank you, Peter. Thank you, Barry, for showing up here tonight. And we have a great secretary, and thank you very much for your great work. Well, thank you for coming in. Go to the mic.
The OPP are in a hiring mode now. They're short about 2,500 officers across Ontario, and it's very hard to get any money to do policing anymore because of what's going on in the press, and I think that they're going to have a hard time recruiting young officers because you know, they're going to start body cameras and stuff, but you know, who would want that for as a job, you know? It's pretty tough. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. So I'm going to move on with the agenda here tonight. Does any member of council wish to pull any items off the consent agenda? Seeing none, I will read the recommendation then. That the Council of Towns of George and Bluffs adopt, sorry, Deputy Mayor Carlin, go ahead.
Sorry, I knew there was one I wanted. The 9.1.5 Occidental Indigenous Art Project.
Okay.
If we could pull that, please.
9.1.5.
Yeah, and the 9.1.1 as well, Community Schools Alliance.
Okay. Is there any other member who'd like to pull a item off the agenda? Seeing none? So I'll read the other recommendation. The Council of Towns of George and Bluffs adopt consent agenda for information as circular less 9.1.5, 9.1.1. Someone to move put it on the floor, please. Moved by Councilor Sullivan, second by Councilor Pringle. Is there any discussion of the motion before us? Seeing none, a show of hands, all in favor? Opposed, the motion is carried. So, Deputy Mayor Carlton, please go ahead with 9.1.1.
Okay, my question on that one is they're having a virtual meeting on that Community Schools Alliance during AMO. And I'm wondering if we're going to have anyone attend that virtually, just to take part and to listen and find out what's going on with that one.
I believe, Madam Clerk, it's open to everyone on council. So anyone can attend if they wish. Am I correct in saying that?
That is correct, Mr. Mayor. The only asterisk I would add would be that per the council remuneration policy, should a member wish to attend this policy and be remunerated for their attendance, it would need to be approved by a motion of this council.
Okay, so I guess I'm going to put it on the floor. How many members would like to attend that virtual conference? Sorry, it's not a conference, it's a meeting.
It's just a virtual meeting that's at 7 o'clock on the Tuesday night, August 9th.
Oh, Councilor Barfoot, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and this is for you, Deputy Mayor. I thought we discussed this at a previous council meeting, and it was council's opinion that we not join it. So why are we going to the meeting?
Councilor Barfoot,
I just don't understand the importance of it when it was council's wishes to not join it again.
Councilor Barfoot, I do believe that a motion was passed by council to join the School Alliance, and we did. The motion did pass, so we are a member. Where the question come up was, we're a member, but we do not have any representation on the executive board, and that will be dealt with by what I understand by the new term of council because it's in the next term. Deputy Mayor Carlton.
My reason for wanting to sit in on that meeting would be just to keep up to date, to be aware of what's going on, because they're not going to report back to us. We are members now, but if we're not involved, I don't know how we get the information. So I would be willing to sit in that meeting that evening.
Well, I understand what I have heard about it, Deputy Mayor Carlton. They will respond back to us about what happens with the minutes of their meetings and so on. So we will know what's going on. It's not that we're going to be left in the dark. It's just we don't have any voting rights per se. That's all we're missing. But is there anyone else besides Deputy Mayor Carlton would like to attend? Councilor Barfoot?
Well, I'm not even going to Amos, so I'm not going to attend. But I guess my question is, if they're going to respond back to us, why are we paying money out to send someone to go to that meeting? You know, are we doing this just to create another committee or what?
Well, it's not a committee, Councillor Barfoot. It's not a seminar. It's a virtual meeting, a webinar. I think it's 1 day from 7 to 9.
Call it what you want, but we have to pay for someone to go.
It's the council's direction. If council does not want to pay the council member to go, the council member can still attend, but they will not be paid for attending.
As long as they understand it's at no pay.
So I guess I'm gonna have to put a motion on the floor then. Will council support the deputy mayor to attend this meeting and be paid enumeration for it? Deputy mayor?
It's a virtual meeting. All it would be costing is 2 hours for me to sit in on that meeting. I'm not attending AMO myself, but it's virtual, so there's no travel time or anything involved. How about I just sit in on it at no pay? Let's just leave it at that.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I was going to say the same thing. I have every intention of going in on it if my time was available, and I wasn't going to pay for it. Okay, your next one is 9.1.5.
So with that one, I think they are asking for someone from the municipality to be there to actually speak. I plan on going to that one that afternoon, and so just didn't know, Mr. Mayor, if that was something you were planning on attending and speaking, or...
I was invited by them to go to the opening, asked to say a few words. Okay.
It's fine. I will be there as well, but that's fine. No problem.
Okay. So that's the two items on the consent agenda. Now, Madam Clerk, I need a motion to, you see these for information? So moved by Deputy Mayor Carlton, second by Councilor Pringle. The motion is to accept the two pieces of correspondence. Show of hands, all in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Now for me to catch up. Committee reports. The recommendation is that the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting held on June 8th, 2022 be adopted, including recommendation COW 2022-034 and COW 2022-043. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Thompson, second by Councillor Barfoot. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? Seeing none, a show of hands, all in favor of the motion? Opposed? The motion is carried. Now I believe I'm down to staff reports, Madam Clerk, and we do not have any. Madam Clerk, do we have any questions for the public? No? Oh, so we're down to bylaws. Our first bylaw recommendation is whereas council has given consideration to the written comments submitted by the agencies in the decision on proposed zoning bylaw amendment application Z0622 for Lynn Robinson for property located at 745 Joint Street, and whereas council has considered oral submissions made at the public meeting, therefore be it resolved, Council of the Towns of Georgian Bluffs is satisfied that the proposed amendment is consistent with the Provincial Policy Statement 2020 and other governing regulations, and that bylaw 2022-33 be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor, clerk, and sealed to seal the corporation. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Thompson, second by Councillor Barfoot. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? Seeing none, a show of hands, all in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. We're now down to other bylaws. The recommendation is that bylaw 2022-34 being a bylaw to authorize a site plan amendment agreement with Georgian Villa Incorporated for the development of Blue Bay Villa, which site plan agreement was authorized in accordance with bylaw 41/2014, be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed to seal the corporation, and endorsed in the bylaw book. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. Moved by Deputy Mayor Carlton, second by Councillor Sutherland. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? Seeing none, show of hands, all in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Our next recommendation is that bylaw 2022-36 being a bylaw to authorize an amendment to the master subdivision agreement authorized by bylaw 2020-12 with Northridge Homes Limited for a registered plan of subdivision 16M76 in the geographic township of Sarawak be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed of the corporation, and endorsed in the bylaw book. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Thompson, second by Councillor Sutherland. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? Seeing none, a show of hands, all in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. We're down to our next bylaw. The recommendation is that bylaw 2022-38 being a bylaw to establish a joint compliance audit committee to adopt terms of reference be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed of the corporation, and endorsed in the bylaw book. Excuse me. Somebody to move, put it on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Sutherland, second by Councillor Pringle. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? See none, a show of hands, all in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Moving right along for our agenda, we're now down to unfinished business. Madam Clerk, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So following our committee meeting last week, I met with our staff, including our facilities coordinator, Zach Carson, in regards to what the township could aim to plan for our Canada Day celebrations. Now that we're moving into a post-pandemic world, we can likely host something in person again. So as mentioned last week, I would still encourage all members of council to submit a video submission featuring yourselves at your favorite locations throughout Georgian Bluffs. So pick anywhere that you feel can help show off our beautiful township and make a video that's 30 seconds to 1 minute long, just wishing your constituents a happy Canada Day.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And may I ask you while you're talking about that, the email you send out, you don't want us to send them before June 25th, or I didn't understand that?
June 27th, if you could, simply because the editing process is a little bit extensive.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you like that? Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Pringle?
Yeah, just to add to that, you'd mentioned you wanted it to be a Teams. I didn't understand that part.
So Teams has a chat feature, and I only recommend that because Outlook has sizing limitations in your attachments. So if your video is lengthy or has high visual content, then it won't send via email. So simply attach it to the Teams chat.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Carlin?
Can we do the same as I did last year and create it as a YouTube link?
Absolutely. Thank you. Whatever works for you.
Madam Clerk, I'm going to make a video and just bring it in to you and let your expertise do your thing.
No problem. That sounds great. So in addition to that, in speaking with our facilities coordinator, we are looking to bring our Big Bay celebrations back to life with a little bit of a different spin. The event will be hosted at 9 a.m. at our Big Bay dock, but instead of cake and ice cream, it will be a pancake and bacon breakfast open to the public for everyone to attend. So we will still have our speakers and our raising of the flag and singing of O Canada, but instead of a cake and ice cream at 8 a.m. in the morning, we'll give people breakfast instead.
Cool. Do you have to line up before? Deputy Mayor Carlton?
Who's cooking breakfast? Is that council's job?
No. We will have the event catered.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for doing that, you and your staff. Thank you.
And if I may, just to add to that, now that I have mentioned it to council, formal invitations will be sent out and formal media releases inviting the public will be circulated as well.
Thank you. That's great. So I'll move on since we have no other unfinished business. We have new business, none. So we're down to notice of motion. the expansion of the Integrity Commissioner role to recommend recall of municipal councillors. I'm going to read the recommendation. This is a notice of motion presented by member Kathy Colburn. Whereas Council of the City of Owen Sound passed a motion requesting support of the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing to create additional opportunities for training and further to study the merits of allowing the recall of municipal councillors under careful prescribed circumstances at their meeting on May 30th, 2022. And whereas across municipal councils in Ontario, there have been appalling incidents of monogamy, I hope I'm saying that right,
Misogyny.
and hatred. Whereas the powers of the Office of the Integrity Commissioner do not include the ability to recommend expulsion of councillors. Now therefore, the Township of Georgian Bluffs Council supports the City of Owen Sound in their request to the ministry and further direct staff to send a letter to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing with copies being sent to the federal government, provincial government, Associated Municipalities of Ontario, AMO, and all Ontario municipalities requesting that the ministry study the merits of the following recall of municipal councillors under careful prescribed circumstances, including display of hatred,
Misogyny.
misogyny, sorry, and forms of discrimination, and facilitate strengthen ongoing orientation and training sessions for councils, local boards, and committees. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Colburn, second by Deputy Mayor Carlton. Councillor Colburn, hi. Do you wish to speak to this?
Thank you, Mayor Burley. I don't know that there's too much more to say other than what was presented in the motion. I think the general sense is that there are certain very prescribed circumstances whereby the powers of the Integrity Commissioner cannot and do not go far enough. And I think this letter of support might go a long way towards addressing some of these incidents that we've seen even locally recently. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Colburn. Is there any comments on the motion before us? See none, a show of hands, all in favor of the motion? Opposed? The motion is carried. What's the weather like in Newfoundland, Councillor Colburn?
It's cold, Mr. Mayor, and to be honest, at 6 degrees, I think I'd rather be in the sunny, balmy Georgian Bluffs. It is beautiful here, though.
Thank you. Okay, moving on for agenda. Down to closed session, I believe. I'll read the recommendation. Go ahead, Councillor Sullivan.
At this time, I'm going to declare conflict and leave the meeting.
Okay, so noted. The council will move into closed session at 6:30 with the CEO clerk to discuss 19.1, a persistent plan, procedure, criteria, or instructions to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality of local boards. Someone to move, put it on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Colburn, second by Councillor Pringle. Any discussion on the motion before us? See none, show of hands, all in favor of the motion? Opposed? The motion is carried. We are now in closed session.
Okay, Brian, we're back from open session. If you can please enable the live stream.
Thank you, Madam CEO. We are now back in open session. Council moved into closed session to discuss matters under open meeting exception K of section 239 of the Municipal Act. As a result of closed session discussions, direction was provided to staff. Conferring bylaw, the bylaw number 2022-39 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council on June 15th, 2022 be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk and sealed in the bylaw book. Someone to move to put the motion on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Thompson, second by Councillor Pringle. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? See none, a show of hands, all in favor of the motion? The motion is carried. Committee of the Whole will meet regularly scheduled July 6, 2022 at 5 p.m. Additionally, a special meeting of council has been called for June 22nd, 2022 at 7 o'clock at the Campbell Arena to discuss drainage concerns in the Campbell Village. Members of the public are encouraged to participate in said meeting by registering with the clerk by 12 p.m. on June 17th. We may have to call another special call meeting before then, but we'll see what happens. There's no other discussion. I'll ask for adjournment of this meeting. Moved by Deputy Mayor Carlton, second by Councillor Pringle. Show of hands, all in favor of adjournment. Opposed, the motion is carried. We're now adjourned. Thank you, everybody.